This episode of Fight Stories is brought to you by the fine folks over at Absolute Nature CBD. For the best in all natural CBD oil and CBD oil products, go to absolutenature.com, plug in the promo code Goon Squad, save yourself a little 20%. But guess what? It's Christmas. The Sunshine Boys and the fine folks over at Absolute Nature CBD want to share the love. So we're giving away some CBD oil and CBD oil products. All you have to do to win is share your favorite episode from Season 2 of Fight Stories. Tag us, tag AbsoluteNatureCBD.com, and use the hashtag Fight Stories Christmas Giveaway. And you guys could win the 30 milliliter 1000mg CBD oil bottle. That's a $99 value. The CBD oil softgels, that's a $90 value. Or the CBD oil Salve, which is a $70 value. And if you retweet and share the most between now and December 24th, we'll send you all three. Merry Christmas from Fight Stories, the good people over at Absolute Nature CBD, and Noodles.
Hey, this is Tyler. You're listening to another episode of Fight Stories. We are here today in Kitchener, Waterloo, with our guest, NHL alumni Steve Seftel. Steve, thanks so much for being here, for having us here at your home, actually. We're in Steve's sports room. Steve just put out a book. It's called Shattered Ice, and it's available now. You're going to want to check it out, especially after this episode. So thanks so much for having us here, Steve.
You're welcome, Tyler. It's a pleasure for me to have you and to be a part of the Fight Stories podcast, for sure.
Awesome. I realized I said us like I was plural. I'm so used to my co-host John Moses being with us, but John's not here today, so it's just a one-on-one. But we're going to talk about everything. We're talking about old school OHL. We're going to be talking about the AHL. You played hockey in one of the toughest eras, ever. I think it became this. It's almost like a nuclear arms race for tough guys back then. And everyone did their part. Everyone kind of protected themselves back in your era, right? Everyone had to...
Absolutely. And I do have an interesting story with a familiar name that I'm sure most of the listeners will have heard of. My second year and junior in Kingston, our toughest guy was named Mark LaForge. And Ty Domi's first game in the OHL was against the Kingston Canadians, or at least the first time I saw him play junior hockey was against the Kingston Canadians, and Mark LaForge was known as one of the toughest guys in the Ontario Hockey League at the time.
He's a big guy.
And
feared across the league, right?
Well known for his reputation for being able to handle himself physically. And a big guy, like 6'2", 210, and Ty was a rookie, and first game in Kingston, he challenged Forgy to a fight at a face-off. And I have a chapter in Shattered Ice, and I talk about that game. And sitting on the bench as a group going, who is this kid?
He's so small back then, too.
Yeah, he was small, and we didn't know who he was, of course. And the fight wasn't the greatest fight. They kind of couple punches and then they ended up on the ground.
If you watch it, I know Ty Domi, he had it in his movie that he put out,
yes, that's right,
What It Takes, the Ty Domi story, and
there's a clip, isn't
they
there?
line up off the face-off, and Domi does kind of like a sweep trip, which is you don't see that too often in hockey, and they go to went to the ice, but it was...
And we were all wondering, who is this kid? And then didn't take long before we figured it out, and Ty had a terrific career, and what a tough player he was, and real competitor. But you're right, it was a different time in the Ontario Hockey League back then, and hockey in general.
Yeah.
And it was just a different era, and we're moved into a point where maybe those, if you want to call them enforcers, maybe aren't around, but just the guys today, Ty could still play, and that's maybe one of the differences back then.
He could really skate. Yeah. He was just like an overall strong athlete. I mean, he could have played 3 different professional sports as well.
Yeah, that's right.
They said soccer, football as a kicker, and hockey. And he says that hockey was actually his third best sport, but that's what he ended up going with. So that must have been really interesting to see a young Ty Domi, because he's so brash and kind of arrogant, especially when he was young. I couldn't imagine a teenage Ty Domi.
I think about our division back then too. In the Ontario League, it was the old Leyden division.
Yeah,
we had the M's in the Leyden division, and then in our division, the Cornwall Royals had Rob Ray, the Belleville Bulls had Troy Crowder, Peterborough Petes had Ty Domi.
That's just wild.
Oshawa Generals, I think, had Scott Mahoney and Tony Joseph and a couple other guys that could really big, strong guys. But it was like you were saying, we were talking about earlier, every team had one or two guys like that.
Yeah, it was just really thick. And the culture of like hockey back then was very macho. Like it was more, geared towards, toughness. I think when you get guys like Troy Crowder in the league and
yeah,
and you got to go against them. That's got to be pretty scary, especially the way he developed pretty fast. Like when he came into the league as a rookie, he cut a swath through that league in the NHL.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to see a younger version of him, he must have been a lot bigger than a lot of guys probably.
He was a big guy, around 6'4", and he was an imposing figure on the ice as well. Yeah,
and he played for Belleville, so that would have been your big rival team when you were playing with Kingston, right?
Yeah, our arch rivals. I think he started his career in Hamilton, if I'm right, Hamilton Steelhawks. But yeah, he ended up in Belleville, our arch rival. And we had a lot of infamous run-ins with them. I remember my rookie season in Kingston, we had a infamous brawl in the pregame warm-up in Belleville.
You don't see that anymore.
No, and it was long. I was injured at the time, and I had a broken ankle, and I watched that brawl from the stands.
Oh, wow.
So no referees on the ice. Not a lot of fans were in the arena yet, and
That's
it went
crazy.
on for almost 30 minutes before it was over, and I had never seen anything like it. Like, it's the first time in my life I had experienced that. And it's kind of terrorizing because there's no rules.
There's no one to stop it.
No,
right?
it's just like a street fight.
Yeah. It's almost like that. I guess it's very much like the one that the Philadelphia Flyers and Montreal Canadiens had in the playoffs. The referees weren't out on the ice.
That's right,
I think it was... I forget who it was. They're shooting the pucks in the other team's net, and next thing you know, Dave Brown's out there with doesn't even have his jersey on, and like you got nothing to grab onto, fighting a guy like that.
Well, since we're on to talking about pregame brawls, I have to tell another story. That same season, back in the day, the Toronto Marlboros were also in our division.
Okay.
And so one of the cool things about that is we get to go to Maple Leaf Gardens 4 times a year to play the Marlies, which is a great thrill. And we had a game at the Gardens one Saturday afternoon, and one of our players skated into their end during warm-up, like over their blue line and around their net.
Oh, that's really laying it down. Right?
Yeah, that was laying it down, and an invitation. That's another story in my book as well. It's called that chapter's called "Saturday Afternoons All Right for Fighting."
Yeah.
In my book, Shattered Ice. And as our player was coming back to center, they had a big tough guy who was a physical defenseman named John Blessman, and he intervened as well as some other players, and it turned in. And then once that started, everybody came to center ice, and we had a pregame brawl.
Who was it that skated into the other teams?
Mike Maurice was his name. Okay. And he was a pretty good fighter himself, and could also handle himself physically. And it was a bold move. Incidentally, after that game, and not too far down the road, the OHL put in a rule that the officials, the referees, had to be on the ice for warm-up. So that's where today you see the linesman standing at center. Mm-hmm. That rule went in shortly after, sometime after that altercation.
Because there's such a competitive edge in these rivalries, and guys are always wanting to, even mentally, you're getting in their head. Like if you're skating over that blue line, you're messing with them, and it's such a territorial thing to protect your end, even in the warm-ups, and that's why you always see the tough guys talking at center ice.
And really, in those days, you didn't dare put your foot over the center red line to have somebody skate into your zone. That was really You said laying it down, yeah.
Oh, it's like Wensink challenging the Minnesota bench.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't get more bold than that.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that's funny. And I have a question for you. Did you ever see LaForge fight Crowder? Did they ever hook up to
You know, interesting. They're both from the Sudbury area.
Yeah.
I just saw a show recently on the Kelvington boys.
Okay.
Wendell Clark, Joe Kosher.
Kelly Chase.
Yeah, Chase. And they talked about how those guys had never fought each other.
Yeah, they're like, they treated each other like cousins, right?
Yeah. So I know that Mark LaForge and Troy Crowder are both from the Sudbury area, but I don't know if they fought. I didn't see it myself, but it doesn't mean they didn't along the way. But I didn't see them fight in junior. No, I'm not sure about professionally.
I have a question for you then also about LaForge. Was he not the one that got the lifetime ban from the OHL?
Yeah.
Was he playing with you when that happened?
No. So what happened there was going into would have been Mark and I are the same age, and we were going into our final year of junior, and in the summer prior to our last season of junior, Kingston Canadians traded Mark to Sudbury Wolves, his hometown.
Yep.
And I remember being really disappointed because he was. We had two 19-year-old veteran defensemen coming back, and he was one and arguably the toughest player in the league at the time.
Yeah, that gives everyone a little room.
Yeah, and he's a 19-year-old veteran, and it would have been his fourth year in the league. So anyway, he got traded to Sudbury. That incident happened while he was with the Sudbury Wolves that season.
Okay.
I believe in a game against the Guelph Platers in another brawl.
What did he do again? What was the...
my understanding from and not being there, just remembering what was said at the time, is that there was a brawl of everybody on the ice fighting, and nobody really wanted to fight him, is my understanding, given his reputation, and he ended up being the third man in some other altercations.
Yeah.
But I wasn't there,
yeah.
So it's just what we had heard.
And that's the thing about that era too, is not everything exists on video like it does today. So the stories are really what we have to go on, and the secondhand accounts and firsthand accounts of people that were there. So it's but that was definitely a big thing in hockey. A guy getting a lifetime suspension from the OHL.
Yeah,
and because the OHL is a pretty prominent league, people pay attention, right? So. Yeah. And then he ended up playing in the NHL after that. But
and he did, he went to he played in the American Hockey League and a few other. He had a professional career.
You kind of get on everyone's radar if you're a tough guy and you get banned from a league.
He had already been drafted by the Hartford Whalers and was in the organization at that time. Yeah,
that didn't hurt him too much anyway. So if he would he have just gone up to AHL then after that, or?
I can't say 100% how that all... I feel like he sat out that season, but I'm not 100% sure. But I do know I played against him in the minors.
Okay, yeah.
In the American Hockey League on a couple occasions, yeah.
Very
Later,
good.
after, when I turned pro, which would have been the following season.
What was it like playing against Rob Ray then, like a young Rob Ray? Because he was... He kind of morphed into a much tougher fighter as he got older, I think. But like in Junior A, he would have probably, or in OHL, he must have been
similar to Ty. He was making a name for himself early, and people were talking about Rob Ray before we had even played the Cornwall Royals.
Okay,
we were, you start hear from friends, or you got friends around the league, or other coaches around the league. People are talking about certain things, and I remember hearing Rob Ray's name off the ice. And he was already building his reputation.
Yeah.
I played against him, 3 years of junior, and then again in the American League because he was drafted by the Buffalo Sabres and played. He started his career with the Rochester Americans.
Yeah. So like all those like cities are pretty close in proximity, and also in OHL in the southern, the eastern Ontario.
Yeah.
Those teams, they're. Yeah, you're going to play those guys all the time back then.
Yeah.
And Kingston, what was it like playing junior in Kingston? Because Kingston can be kind of an isolating city, I think. It's one of the toughest cities in Canada. I think so. Like we've interviewed a bunch of guys, like local dudes from Kingston on our podcast, like street fighters and kickboxers, and like it's just like you have all these different. You have prisons there. You have you got universities. You got hockey players. You have the military. There's just anywhere you go in Kingston, it's like someone can kick your ass.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. You hit on a few of the big ones there. Like in town, it's usually government, the institutions like So you got your Queen's University and RMC, and then your federal institutions like the penitentiary. So
that's right.
Those are three of the big employers.
Yeah. There's prison guards, and then the cons that get out stick around.
It's a great sports town. It really is, and it's got a great history as a city. I mean, it's one of the most important cities in Canada when you go back to our history, and the birthplace of Sir John A. Macdonald, our first Prime Minister, and it's a great sports town. The Tragically Hip are from there. I mean, they have a special place in the heart of Canadians. It's a passionate city, so they love their hockey. They love baseball. Queen's University has a great reputation academically and sports-wise. And all those things together, you even talk about the penitentiaries. I mean, they're known for the penitentiary. But all those things together do...
There's a lot of great people in Kingston, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. It's a great city. I loved playing there. But all those things together create a real strong culture. And it's a sports culture, too. And, of course, how can we forget Don Cherry is from Kingston?
Absolutely, yeah.
And he's one of their biggest spokesmen, right?
Oh, he's the best.
It's a great town. I loved playing hockey there. Those 3 years I played there were really good, and I like the people, and they can get behind a team, and they can sure tell you when you're not doing well either. As was the case, I have another chapter in my book, Shattered Ice, called "What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger."
Yep.
I mean, it's not one of my most proudest hockey seasons by any means, but it's a heck of a story. My last year junior, the Kingston Canadians lost 28 games in a row.
Oh, that's painful.
Painful, yeah, you're right. And that's why it's worthy of an entire chapter. And I'll tell you another funny story to that. So, in 2000, that was the 87-88 season. And in 2008, I got a call from the Kingston Whig Standard. And they said, Steve Seftel there started speaking, and he said, this is Porter from the Kingston Whig Standard. We'd like to talk to you about your hockey time in the city. And at the moment, I thought he wanted to talk about my career.
No, we want to talk to you about all the losing.
What he said is, we're doing a story on the 20th anniversary of the team that lost 28 games in a row.
Oh, my God.
And we'd like to ask you a few questions, if you don't mind. I wasn't the only player they had contacted, and they did a 2-page story. Like, it was a large story, because when you look back, it's really... Even when I tell people today, it's almost unbelievable that
28 games in a row is,
in any sport, like you could lose 28 games in a row.
You guys should get team rings.
And I'll tell you another funny part to this is, in my opinion, the reason the streak ended, we ran out of games.
Oh, that's funny.
It was the last 28 games.
Didn't make it to the gas station on the empty tank.
So what I would tell you too is, in the chapter, I give you reasons. I mean, it didn't happen for nothing. There were some contributing, more than a few contributing factors, which I talk about. I mean, the team was sold, the coach resigned, the trainer resigned, and I guess the whole story's in the book. But it wasn't. There were contributing factors.
It happens, right?
Yeah.
Like, you just get into that losing skid, and you're, how do you break out?
We couldn't stop it. Yeah, you couldn't. Like, literally couldn't stop the bleeding. Like,
it's funny seeing guys jump ship when
when
things aren't going too good, man. I remember my brother, he played junior hockey for Bancroft, the Bancroft Hawks, and a couple of the vets left, and next thing you know, it was just like everyone was running. These guys were like, I think that there was like, they're all like rookies. The whole team was almost, everyone was a rookie playing on this team.
Yeah.
And they got to go play against like all, teams full of vets, and it was just a rough year for the boys.
I think that's something I didn't realize at the time. You make a good point there. You've got 16 to 20-year-old hockey players.
Yeah.
You think you're mature to handle these things when you're a teenager, but looking back, were we really mentally ready to deal with that type of streak? And if without the proper leadership at the top...
That's it. If you don't have the proper leadership, it is a dark road.
It can go awry real fast.
That's right.
And the wheels just fall off, and you don't know how to turn it around.
Did you have did you guys not have much of a veteran presence in the locker room when that was going on?
No, that's what I was saying. We had a very young team. That's what made, when you mentioned rookies, we had a lot of rookies. like you said, we had traded Mark LaForge, the toughest player in the league, who would have been a 19-year-old veteran. I'm just saying, that was another.
You would have felt safer. I think the one thing that I always say about hockey and tough hockey is people that don't like fighting or don't like the rough element of the game, they've never played on a team that has been bullied. Nothing is worse than being on a team that doesn't feel like they have the protection, because you can't play loose. You can't don't feel comfortable. It's like you get a knot in your stomach just going into the other.
And intimidation. You're right. Intimidation is part of hockey. It has been, and that you're right. There is a feeling with having security and as even not necessarily that but when you've got each other's back.
That's it, right?
Like, you can count on the next guy to stand up for you.
If someone does something cheap to you, someone else is going to have your back. Someone's going to step in on your behalf if you can, and vice versa. And that's what propels teams to winning. Yeah,
you get that cohesion as a group. You're right. It creates a winning atmosphere. Team toughness. Yeah, for sure.
And they I just think that that people don't pay much attention to that, and also the big difference between age groups, 16-year-old to a 21-year-old, that is a huge difference that people don't really pay attention to. That they don't understand. Like, you do need a presence, like a guy who's a bit older that can kind of police things for younger guys, so they can focus on contributing the way that they know how. Right.
And talking about that team, we had a tough player in Scott Pearson, a heck of a hockey player, first-round pick of the Leafs. He was injured for those last 2 months of the season. We had Brian Fogarty, who is a terrific an amazing hockey player, first-round pick of the Quebec Nordiques. He was injured. So you talked about the veteran leadership, like that. When we had lost some of that at the end of the year due to injuries, and those are the things that people didn't see who were just watching the losses mount. But there was more to the story than just 28 losses in a row. There was other factors,
and losing coaches and stuff. That's a big thing.
It was. So I turned pro the following season, and it was there was lingering effects from that year on everybody who played on that team.
Oh, really?
Because you don't get over that overnight. It's hard to leave that behind. It left a mark on everybody.
It stays with you for a bit, right? Because it's like, is this going to happen to me again, or am I part of the big part of this reason?
And I know there's some of the younger players on the team. I personally think never recovered from that season.
They just never got the confidence,
Confidence. They were labeled. I mean, I guess they could have fought their way out of it, but I just think as a group, that team, some players did not respond well from that season.
Like, were you already drafted then? Yeah. So you're like, you kind of came out of that luckily.
Yeah, and fortunately for me.
Mark.
And the other thing I was drafted, and not only. So when that season ended, the Capitals sent me immediately to Binghamton to the American Hockey League because it gave me a chance just to learn the ranks of the pro game, and also got me out of that
into a more of a culture of winning.
It just got me out of that situation. That kind of it was toxic. So it got me out of there into Binghamton. Now I'm with guys who are professionals and guys I had known from the organization. And
was there infighting within the team while this was going on? Like,
no,
it wasn't like
no.
It was. That's interesting, because sometimes you see the frustrations boil over and like.
Yeah, that's a great point. No, we stuck together. And I've seen that in my career. That team did stick together in the room.
That's cool.
We were not. That's one positive from that season, and I talk about that in the book. That what didn't kill us made us stronger together. We did not fracture as a team.
Oh, that's
we felt like the front office abandoned us.
Yeah, so you guys kind of banded together against everyone else.
Yeah,
it was
that's exactly right.
There's a lot of pressure on you guys.
I called it. Right? I refer to it in the book as Lord of the Flies. we decided we would run, the players were going to run the team.
Oh, that's funny.
As I was saying, a bunch of teenage hockey players. We weren't equipped to do that.
That's
we thought we were, but we weren't.
Bunch of teenage guys.
Yeah, it was a very trying season, and it was the last season for the Kingston Canadians, which is kind of sad.
This episode of Fight Stories is brought to you by Absolute Nature CBD.com. Guess what? It's Christmas time, and we're doing an Absolute Nature CBD Christmas giveaway. The Sunshine Boys and the fine folks over at Absolute Nature CBD are giving away some Christmas goodies, and here they are. You can get the Salve right there, the CBD oil salve, good for massages, the softgels, and or I should say, or the original CBD oil 1000 milligram. That's $100. The soft gels are 90. The Salve is 70. All you have to do is retweet or share an episode from season 2. Hell, you can share them all, and that'll enter you in it for a chance to win one of them. Now, if you share or retweet the most between now and December 24th, we're going to send you all 3. How about that? It's a $250 value. Merry Christmas from the boys over at Fight Stories and Absolute Nature CBD. All you have to do is share and make sure you use the hashtag Fight Stories Christmas giveaway. Tag both us, the Sunshine Boys, and the fine folks over at Absolute Nature CBD. Merry Christmas, folks.
And then next year they were called the Raiders. Mm-hmm. They wore black and silver for 1 year. And then the following season they were sold again and switched to the name Frontenacs, which they are back to the old Bruins colors. Mm-hmm. So an interesting tidbit about that is the guys who were rookies that during the losing streak and who stayed in Kingston for 3 years, there's only a couple.
Yeah.
If you look at their stats, they played on 3 teams in Kingston with 3 different names. Kingston Canadians, Kingston Raiders, Kingston Frontenacs.
So they got more jerseys than you.
Yeah, that's right. It's a bizarre... I've checked that out a few times, and it makes... Poor guys. I don't know. I'd be love to hear what they think about that.
Oh, that's funny.
Or don't.
And so in junior... You weren't known as a pugilist yourself. You were, you're second round draft pick, 40th overall, right? And that's you had a pretty good career, in coming up, and but you still had to fight a little bit and mix it up, right?
Did you say I was known as a pugilist?
No, you weren't. You weren't known as a pugilist. Yeah, so
sorry,
you still had to fight. You still had to fight some battles down there, right?
Yeah, I was not known as a pugilist, and it's interesting. Is looking back, going into junior hockey, I fully expected I was going to have to fight. Mm-hmm. And I tell a story also in Shattered Ice how my midget buddies and I, after the OHL draft that summer, we got together on a front lawn and played, which I wouldn't encourage kids to do at home. Do not do this at home. But we played a game called Buckets.
Okay, yeah.
Where you put on your hockey helmets and your gloves.
Yep.
And you just start swinging at each other.
Yeah. Some people call it locker boxing, and buckets is the...
Okay.
Locker
boxing? I mean...
I know buckets,
okay. Yeah. But that was all because of the anxiety or anxiousness, the expectation that you were going to have to fight.
Mm-hmm. And these guys... This is midget, the league, not your midget friends, the little people.
Midgets.
Punching out little people on the front lawn.
No, we were... 16 and 17-year-olds, and doing it willingly to what we thought was practice boxing.
Was there full cages then?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was the full cage. It wasn't a visor league. No. So there is a thing where, when you drop the gloves, you got to get the guy's helmet off. That's a skill, so you can kind of... I always found that there was funny guys that have little tricks. They'd invert the strap so you can't get it off.
Yeah.
But that's like a whole other element to a fight in hockey when you got to get that cage off, right?
I'll tell you another funny story. That my first year junior is when the Ontario Hockey League brought in visors as a mandatory piece of equipment. The year prior was just the helmet. Yeah. So then they brought in they were called iTech visors. Yep. They were the strongest visor I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. It was hard.
Yeah, the original iTech.
The original iTech. It was a shield. It was like the bubble the kids wear, but only half.
Hitting your hand on those would hurt, right?
That's kind of the story. So that season, when guys didn't get the helmet off, their hands were butchered because those visors didn't budge. Mm-hmm. And you would just hear crack, crack, crack on the visor. And you always knew when the punches weren't hitting the face because the visor was so hard. Yeah. You'd hear the punches landing. Guys,
you can't stop punching. You got, what I mean?
Their hands would be mush. If you didn't get that helmet off.
That's Cherry always hated. Don Cherry always hated the visors, and I think that's partially why. And then in the NHL, some guys would wear them and other guys wouldn't. Yeah, so it's a disadvantage in a fight. And
then you would get the situation where 2 guys would just look at each other and they'd both take their helmets off.
Buckets off and give it a little spin at center ice, and here we go. I always thought that was the best because it was the respectful way, honorable way of doing business, and now it's like you try that and you're in trouble.
So then I remember my first year junior. I was as excited to get in my first fight as I was to score a goal. I mean, to get it out of the way. Mm-hmm. I wanted that first goal, probably a little bit more.
Of course.
But I definitely, that first fight always kind of weighed on me. Like, let's just get this over with.
That's right, yeah.
So I can say I've done it. It's behind me, and then if it happens again, it happens. But at least the first one's done. Mm-hmm. And I even remember a little bit of pressure in the room, almost like, hey, it's like time to get that first one out of the... and it was just kind of suggested, let's just get the first one out of the way.
Just to you or to other guys?
No,
like
the kind team? Of as a team, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it was almost like, I don't want to say an initiation, but like you said, it was a different time.
Yeah, and you know what? If your team sees you fight, they respect you a little bit more because they know that you're willing to answer the bell, right?
Yes, and I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with that having your back and that team toughness.
Yeah.
Not that you were going to drop your gloves every night, but that you were there as a group to know I've got your back.
If there's a line brawl and you're the one guy that doesn't fight, you know, you don't want to Ned Braden it.
Yeah. So, but I just remember that weighing on me, and then I got the first one out of the way. It just happened to be I scored my first goal in Cornwall, and it's funny is after that goal, I thought just get it all done tonight.
Yeah.
So I fought the same game.
Nice.
I had the energy from the goal pumping me up, and I just thought I'm going to fight
That's awesome.
too. And then I challenged. I don't know, challenge as much as instigated. It's a better word for it than challenge. Defenseman from Cornwall got the first fight out of the way, and that they come back in the room. The boys are all patting you on the back and way to go. And then I got in several. I should tell you a bit more. Then I started getting a bunch of fights, and I was going pretty good. And I thought, oh, this isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. Like, I don't know. I was getting cocky, maybe even too.
Yeah.
A little too comfortable with it. And we had a game in Belleville. And they were our arch rival in the day. Kingston and Belleville hated each other. Great rivalry. Our fans hated them. Their fans hated us. And it was just that 401, 45 minutes away. Mm-hmm. Hate your neighbor kind of.
Yeah.
Hatfields and McCoys kind of thing. And we were in Belleville, and they had a tough guy named Todd Hawkins, who was a good fighter. Like, I always thought he was a good technical fighter.
Yeah,
I've
heard his name before. Yeah.
He wasn't the biggest guy, but he knew how to fight. And that's where I was lacking. Like, I was more of just a wild swing in the fist, but not really understanding what I was swinging at.
Yeah.
And that was probably the miss. Anyway, he was a veteran. He was a 19-year-old. And I was a rookie, and he gave me a whack at a face-off in a game that was emotionally charged and had already had some altercations. Our captain was Jeff Chikrin, and he fought Brian Marchment.
Oh, wow.
Who was all...
tough dudes.
Yeah.
Like, Marchment's an underrated guy.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, in terms of fighting. He's known for, his hip checks and, questionable hits and stuff. But he was such a rock-solid D-man, and he could really fight. Like,
he could. And
Chikrin could fight, too.
Yeah.
He's a big boy.
Brian Marchment would always answer the bell. Like he'd come back. Like if he fought someone, he'd be back the next game, like ready to. But
round
if
two.
you needed to do it, round two. If I'm here, and I played against him in the American League too, and it was, he'd probably be a guy you'd love to have on your team.
Oh yeah,
because I never played with him. I always played against him. But
I loved when the Leafs got him.
Yeah. Yeah, he is a real competitor. So this game, Todd Hawkins gave me a whack, and I just felt like standing up for myself at that moment. And he hit me with a bomb, like right in the mouth, and knocked me out. I went out like immediately.
Yeah, like you woke up, don't remember.
Yeah, and I saw it on video after. My legs just like came out from under me, and I just melted into the ice.
Oh wow!
But I did get to the penalty box on my own power. I remember waking up on the ice thinking, just get to the box. Don't make the trainer, not wanting the trainer to come out, just wanting to say, I took the punch and now I'm skating to the box.
On your own.
On my own.
On your own accord. Yeah.
Yeah, without, I say that in the book that the etiquette was, the unofficial hockey etiquette was, don't make the trainer come onto the ice if you can get to the box by yourself.
Yeah.
So that's what was in my head. And I did get to the box on my own power. And again, we talk about concussions or the lack of knowledge of concussions.
Yeah.
I remember playing the rest of that period. It was in the second period.
It's crazy that you keep playing after you got...
I played the rest of that period, and I remember skating around like a bit of a maniac. Like, I'm not even sure I really knew what was happening.
Yeah.
But then we went in for the intermission, and the trainer looked at me, and yeah, I was not with it. And he fortunately sat. I didn't play the rest of that game.
That's good.
That was, yeah.
It's important. People don't understand how important it is to have good trainers.
Yeah.
A trainer is so important. They really do notice things that other people wouldn't notice. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a story, I don't know if you heard the one about Joey Koser, when he knocked out, I think it was Jim Playfair in the minors, and he got called up like immediately, like right after, and he had to fly. I think he was on the East Coast, and he flew over to Detroit to play for the Wings, and he had punched, when he punched Playfair's tooth stuck into his hand.
Yeah.
And so his hand was all swollen up, and he was playing in warm up. He's skating around in warm up, and he was skating with one glove. He didn't have his glove on because it was uncomfortable, right?
Oh, yeah.
And a trainer was like, "Why has this kid only got one glove on?" So he calls him over and checks and sees what's going on. He found out it was a tooth. He goes, "We got to get you to a hospital now." They took him to the hospital, and they saved his hand. They almost would have had to amputate him.
Wow, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's like a trainer, like, just noticing something that small could have, it saved his, whole career, and like a lot of, obviously that would be so bad if you had to amputate your hand or arm because of an infection like that. So yeah, like a trainer noticing a guy hurt, it's really important that they're educated on these things now.
I don't know that this one was so hard to spot either, because just to expand on it a bit more, I was wearing a mouth guard.
Okay.
And he loosened my two front teeth with the punch.
Yeah.
And I needed a root canal because I could wiggle my teeth. That was with a mouth guard in. Like if I hadn't had the mouth guard in, the teeth would have been gone. Yeah. Thankfully, if I had a root canal, they saved the tooth. But I had to spend 2 days in the dentist chair.
Then he would have been skating around and warm up with one glove on.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, yeah. I always was thankful I had the mouth guard in that day.
Did you ever feel that you wanted to avenge that fight with him?
No.
No, it wasn't.
No, I never.
It wasn't. You didn't take it personally.
No, not at all. No, I never. I mean, and we did play against each other for the next year too. He played overage, but no, I never.
Did he ever chirp you?
No, he never did. He was a real
classy.
He was a real respectful player. Actually, I like.
Cool.
He wasn't like that at all.
Some guys say.
Yeah, no, he never. He never chirped. At least that's one thing about Hawk. Yeah, he was. But if he wanted to fight, boy, he could throw. He could throw him. Him and Forgy, Mark LaForge used to have. They had some dandies over the years. Yeah,
no doubt,
for sure. Yeah, and they had another guy in Belleville named Charlie Moore, and those were two tough teams, boy.
Mm-hmm.
Both sides. Like, we had some tough guys, and they did too. And they had Larry Mavity, who was like a old school hockey OHL coach.
Yeah.
Who ended up in Kingston years after I left, but that didn't sit well with me at the time. I thought, how can you bring our arch rival's coach to town? I thought that was pretty a pretty bold move but I guess he did have a good reputation, and he certainly did some good things in Kingston when he went there too.
Right on.
Yeah.
The what would you say is the best fight that you ever saw when you're in that league, when you're in the OHL? What was the one that you had a front row ticket to that you thought was the best?
Boy, the best fight I saw in the OHL. Boy, there's a lot, but I guess a couple I can think of. Mark LaForge and Craig Duncanson. Okay. Had a couple. Craig Duncanson played for the Cornwall Royals at the time. Two tough guys. And I think I got clearer memories of my time in the American League.
Yeah.
And we had a player named Bobby Babcock.
Okay, yeah.
And I remember his rookie year, he fought pretty much everybody. So there was Serge and Mario Robert from the Sherbrooke brothers, Canadians.
Yeah, they were amazing.
Yeah,
like they were both really good fighters. I don't know if there's never been a better brother.
No, I don't think so.
Like they really were tough. And Serge Robert is just like one of the most technically great fighters I've ever seen.
Yeah, they were both legit heavyweights. Serge was the bigger one, as I recall, the taller one. And then we had a guy named You probably remember Sean Cronin.
Oh yeah, Cronin the Barbarian.
Yeah, we had him in Baltimore for a year. Those fights are a little more. I have better memories of the scraps in the American League than I do in the OHL. But yeah, I played with a lot of tough guys. It was in that era when, like we talked about, some guys, Rob Ray, Ty Domi, Troy Crowder. Those guys were just cutting their teeth trying to make it to the
Jim
next
McKenzie,
level. Jim McKenzie, yeah. Jeff Chikrin played. I played junior with him, and then he played for the Hershey Bears. But we were all coming up at the same time.
Was Mike Stothers still in the
Mike
league?
Stothers was. I played against him in Hershey. Yeah.
I used to get those VHS tapes,
Yeah.
like the hockey's hits, bloopers, and brawls. And Stothers they'd always had those old Hershey clips from the AHL, and Stothers would always be in. I played against him. That was our arch rival in the American League, similar to the Kingston Belleville rivalry. When I got to the American League, it was Baltimore and Hershey. They were our closest rival. Played there again 4 or 5 times a year. And what's interesting is our rink. The Baltimore was not a hockey town. Yeah.
So on a regular night, we'd get 2,000 to 3,000 people. When Hershey comes to town, it would be 8 to 10.
Oh wow, that's insane.
Yeah.
Like that makes the rivalry so much more.
Yeah,
important.
it was amazing to me how they just, if it was Hershey, they just came, and I think part of it is because they expected the altercations and the fisticuffs.
Yeah, Baltimore is a tough town, right?
Yeah, it was. But yeah, always the crowds were always intense for Hershey, and similar there. Their fans didn't like us either.
Yeah, when you played for the Skipjacks, was Bennett Wolf around at all?
I was after him.
He just left, eh?
Yeah, so the Pittsburgh Penguins were in Baltimore prior to Washington.
Yes,
and then the Skipjacks were independent for one season.
Okay.
And then the following season, the Washington Capitals moved in there, and that was my rookie year in the American League.
Oh, cool.
And then I spent almost 5 seasons there.
That's cool.
And then the year after I left, the Capitals moved to Portland, and Barry Trotz was the head coach, and they won the Calder Cup.
Yeah.
With that group, Ole Kolzig was on the team. So a bunch of the guys I had played with in Baltimore ended up winning the Calder Cup, but they were in Portland. So the Skipjacks never got to hoist the Calder Cup, but the Portland Pirates did with all those Washington Capitals prospects.
That's pretty cool. Who was on your team back then? What are some of the notable names?
Offensively, it was like OHL names: Mike Richard, Steve Malte, Tim Taylor, who won 2 Stanley Cups, John Purvis, Bill Holder, who had a good NHL career, Jeff Greenlaw, Sean Simpson, who's now one of our goalies, who's now a TSN guy up in Ottawa. I played. And then my favorite coach, which I always talk about, my favorite coach I played for, who wrote the foreword to my book, Shattered Ice, was Doug McLean.
Yeah.
And he had us, there's a good story in the book. I call the chapter Musical Coaches.
Yeah.
Brian Murray and Doug McLean were the coaches in Washington. And Terry Murray, Brian's brother, was the head coach in Baltimore.
Okay.
And around January of 90, David Poyle was the general manager of the Capitals. He fired Brian Murray, and he hired his brother.
Oh, that's funny.
Terry. Like what? Imagine Christmas dinner.
Yeah. There would be a lot of
brotherly love, right? I don't know if that's ever happened before. Only maybe a Sutter.
Maybe with a Sutter.
Yeah.
Listen, we're gonna get another Sutter.
So
we're going with another one.
Mr. Poyle hired Terry Murray to be the new coach of the Washington Capitals. So we needed a coach in Baltimore, and David Poyle sent Doug McLean down to us. And so Doug McLean became our head coach, and him and I connected right away. I always say to people, he was my favorite coach, and he's like the type of coach you do anything for. Like I say, I'd run through walls for him.
Yeah.
And some coaches you just want to win for. I just wanted to win for him. Like that's the way the relationship was. And you always felt like he was in the fight with you.
Yeah.
Like some coaches, you feel like they're guiding, but they're not in.
There's a barrier between you a bit.
They're calling it up. They're leading, but they're not in it. And I felt like Doug was in the trenches with us. So that year, we played the Adirondack Red Wings in the first round of the playoffs, who were coached by Barry Melrose at the time. future NHL coaches going at it, and Doug was our coach, and they got into an altercation through the glass. The benches were side by side.
Great mullet too.
Yeah, great mullet. That's right.
I saw you had a mullet back then too.
That was the 80s hockey hair, or 90s. I guess. It was getting into 80s, getting into the 90s. Yeah, we all had the hockey hair. And Barry Melrose was pounding on the glass, and they were yelling. Him and McLean were yelling at each other, and the glass partition fell down.
Oh.
And the referee threw Barry Melrose out of the game. So we won the series with Mac leading the way. Nick Kyprios was on that team as well,
right on.
who was also a tough customer.
Absolutely.
Also another guy, ex-OHLer who was making his way up to the pro ranks.
And an analyst. Was he with McLean on that?
On working for Sportsnet, that's
yeah.
right. But another guy who was just on the cusp of getting to the NHL. Mm-hmm. And he was a goal scorer in junior.
He had hands.
Yeah, but he realized that he was going to have to do more than just score. Like he realized
the jump is a big leap,
and he just found what his role was going to be. And there was an opportunity, I think, for him as a physical player and to also contribute offensively. So that's the role he took on, and he turned it into. He won a Stanley Cup with the Rangers. And
great career,
yeah. But he was on that Baltimore team, and Doug was the coach, and that was a great season, great group of guys. We ended up losing in the semifinals to Rochester. Mm-hmm. We're getting with Rob Ray. Rob Ray was on that team, Donald Odette, Mike Donnelly. I think their coach was John Van Boxmeer, if I'm correct. But
John Van Boxmeer, there's a name.
I believe so, yeah.
Famous for the Dave Schultz knocking him out. But also, my dad played in a men's league, and Van Boxmeer's there, and he's just rifling pucks. My dad was a goalie. He's like, I'm never playing again. I think my dad retired because John Van Boxmeer had too hard of a slap shot.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, we had a really good team. And another teammate of mine, Scott Metcalf, played for the Rochester Americans. He's a pretty tough customer in his own right. First round pick of the Edmonton Oilers, and interesting, I talk about him in my book too, not only was he a great teammate and a scrappy player, he played on the infamous World Junior team that played in the punch-up in Piestany.
Oh, wow.
For Team Canada at the World Junior Hockey Championships.
If you've never seen this, guys, you got to go on YouTube and check it out. The punch-up in Piestany, is that
punch-up in Piestany in Czechoslovakia.
Oh, wow. And
I've shown that video to my sons over the years, and it's jaw-dropping for them. They don't believe, they just can't believe it. So in my book, In Shattered Ice, I do tell the story because it was my second year in the OHL when that happened, and Scott Metcalf played for us in Kingston. Yeah. He was one of our teammates, and he was over there in that tournament.
Oh, that's crazy.
So we were watching that game because your teammates playing, you're rooting for Canada. Like it's a Christmas time experience for Canadians, right? And I'll never forget it when the brawl started and the lights, to compound it, the lights went out.
That was just a bad, dangerous move.
It was terrible. Like, who thought that was a good idea? Yeah. It's just bizarre. It's a bizarre... Yeah. It's worth, like you said, it's worth going to check it out.
It's so crazy.
See how things have changed, or maybe how crazy things were. But
there's a couple tough guys on that team.
Oh, geez.
Mike Keane.
Everett Sanapass was on that. Was tough. I think Brendan Shanahan on that team?
Shanahan might have been on that team.
We'd have to check it out.
Yeah.
I feel like he might have been.
I think
Not
so.
sure. I think so. But you're right. There were some tough hockey players.
Yeah.
I think Theron Fleury was on that team.
Fleury was on the team.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to look at that later. But the lights went out, and then, of course, in the CBC studios, Brian Williams was with Don Cherry.
Yeah.
And Brian Williams was getting on the back. He's a little bit saying that, the Canadian players, maybe it's a stain on hockey. Like, he was kind of taking that
an anti-fighting stance.
Yeah, and Don Cherry was saying, no way, man. Like, you stand up for your teammates. I don't care. They're hacking us and hooking us. And the Russians were going kind of crazy. Like, they were just swinging wildly. Again, we were talking about, like, the Canadians, they had probably all been in fights before.
A couple guys that knew how to fight.
And, the Russians looked like they didn't know how to fight. A lot of them had their gloves on, and they were just swinging.
Yeah.
Like flailing almost, I think would be a word for it. The arms were... They weren't doing the toe to toe.
The Alexander Semin routine, fish out of water.
And I'll never forget too. One of the last pictures of the brawl is an ex-teammate of mine in Baltimore, goaltender Sean Simpson, who I mentioned a few minutes ago. He's on top of the other goalie from the Russians, kind of shaking it, and they're rolling around in the goalie pads, not really fighting, more just kind of rolling on the ice, and he's on top of them, holding the Russian goalie down. And then both teams were punted from the tournament, and the Russians at the time were not, as I recall, were not in medal contention.
Yes.
We had a shot at the gold still.
Yeah, we kind of got screwed around.
And that's why it was so deflating for the Canadians, because the Russians had nothing to lose. They were out, an off year, or whatever happened to them. They were just well, what do we got to lose by brawling? Yeah,
exactly.
Canada lost. It cost them potentially the gold. So, and then when they came back, a lot of the teams did ceremonies for those guys. And I know we did one in Kingston. They presented Scott Metcalf with a gold medal.
Oh, cool.
Upon his return, just to say, hey, you guys got kind of robbed.
Yeah.
And we support you.
Oh, that's good. Because, that would have been like an isolating feeling it was over there, right? So, it's overseas. You're by you're not in Canada. You're in a foreign country, and then that happens, and people pin a lot of hopes on that tournament. It's a big showcase. It's the biggest showcase for up and coming hockey players, and it affects draft positions.
Yeah, for sure.
And that affects paychecks.
And it's such a prideful
thing. Your
Canada.
Whole country is rooting for you, and then to feel like maybe the country's disappointed in us, and because of that. So when Cherry stepped up to Brian Williams about that was a major move, because it kind of probably shifted a lot of the perception of Canadians about how that is. Because if the media is running an anti-fighting campaign, it really does. I mean, if you see how fighting's been phased out of hockey, that's the media ran that. Now, I always find it hypocritical. They still use fights in every pre-game promo to sell the game, but there's no fights anymore. The same people that put everything under a microscope and scrutinize it, they still use it to sell the game and make money for themselves. But that if Williams was able to just have an unchallenged narrative that was anti-fighting, and he could have made it a lot worse for those kids coming back into Canada. They would have felt like failures, maybe.
Yeah, I think that was part of what Don Cherry was concerned about.
He didn't want them to be blackguards. I think that's what he said. That was the term he used. But Cherry has been such a huge ambassador for hockey players, Canadian young hockey players, that I think that meant a lot to the players probably on that team.
Yeah, and so essentially we mentioned Don Cherry. I should say I have another good chapter in my book called Catching a Cab with Grapes.
Oh, nice.
Where I took a cab with Don Cherry to the Boston Garden in the 1990 Stanley Cup semifinals.
Oh, cool.
The Capitals were playing the Boston Bruins. I was on the Capitals taxi squad, called up at the end of the season.
Nice.
And my roommate Steve Malte, we were both called up from Baltimore. We were at the hotel in Boston. We were going to the game, and we were outside the hotel looking for a cab. And we heard footsteps behind us and a voice, and it said, "Hey boys, let's go. Let's get a cab." We turned. It's Don Cherry.
Did he know who you guys were?
He just knew.
He could tell you're hockey players.
Young guys dressed in the suits, and he loves the suits, right?
Yeah.
He just knew we were hockey players. We were looking for a cab, and he said, so all three of us got in the back of a cab, and we drove to the Boston Garden with Don Cherry, and he talked. The whole way over, he was talking, and I just sat there and stared at him. I couldn't. I just listened. I thought, I'll probably never get this chance again. I'm not saying nothing. I'm just going to listen to everything he says. Yeah, it was great. And then we walked into the rink together, and he went one way, we went to the room the other way. Caps got swept in that series 4-0 by the Bruins. So, I would have been...
So he was happy.
Yeah, he was happy. We were one round from the Stanley Cup, even as a taxi squad.
Yeah.
To be that close to this, if you can get close to the cup at any chance, you'll take it. But then the Bruins played the Oilers, and it was the Oilers Cup first time without Gretzky after the trade, and the Oilers won the cup.
Bill Ranford.
Yeah, and then the only cup without Wayne Gretzky for the Oilers.
It's funny how that series, it was Bill Ranford against Andy Mogan. They had been traded for each other.
Yeah. So I think the Oilers had still most of the team that was still from the dynasty.
They were pretty deep. Yeah. They still had a lot of guys that were around.
Yeah. I think I think at that point their kid line, they called them, if I'm right, was Adam Graves, Joe Murphy, and Martin Jelena. I think
That's
that
right.
was their kid line. That was really had a great playoff for them. Mm-hmm. I mean, then those are three.
Jelena had such a great career, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
He stayed a long time.
I
always pick him in my pool.
Yeah.
He's a playoff performer, too. He was one of those guys that always stepped up in the playoffs.
And for me, Adam Graves, I mean, he was the same age as me. He's probably the top-rated player in the OHL draft when I was selected in 1985.
Yeah.
And then we were both drafted in 1986 in the NHL draft. He went to Detroit. But he was a great career. And,
he was awesome, yeah.
Great skill. Again, a guy who could play a mean skill game.
When he fought, he handled business too. Like he was, who was he? Did he protect Messier quite a bit, or was it? I'm trying to think.
Well, I think he was more I always thought he was Messier's protege. Like he was Messier was the leader, and he was coming under his wing, and he was kind of like the next. He was going to take over that role eventually for the team.
Well, he married Ty Domi's sister, right? Is that
who did? Graves?
Graves.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think so. Yeah, I'd have to double check, but I
didn't know.
I think there was a relationship there. Yeah.
I always thought he was a classy. Adam Graves was a classy guy, played the right way, and then a ton of skill. Like he had it all. He was one of those guys, just a totally complete player. Play all situations, leadership. Like
so, he must have got a lot of respect back when you guys were playing because, like, for him to be the top draft pick and everything, like guys knew. He was,
for sure. Great career in Windsor, the OHL. Great pro career. Like I just thought he was a terrific hockey player. Mm-hmm. Another guy I played against too, similar mold, different type of player. He was Brendan Shanahan. Same thing. Drafted. He's a year younger than me though.
Okay.
I also played against him, and we were rivals growing up in lacrosse.
Oh, okay.
He played for Mimico.
Yep.
Or his hometown in Toronto, and I played for Kitchener, my hometown. And we played lacrosse against each other. Both came into the OHL the same year. He was a year younger, an underage. So he was drafted the year after me to the NHL in '87. Him and Pierre Turgeon that was the sweepstakes that year.
Yep.
And then again, what a great career, and what he's still involved. Still doing. He's another class guy. Again, played very similar. Played to Adam Graves. Played the right way. Mm-hmm. Did everything.
Yeah, he could
won
fight,
Stanley
Cups.
Score,
you could do it all. Yeah, and so I have a question for you. So you guys played lacrosse against each other. When you were playing lacrosse, did you get any tilts in lacrosse? We haven't had any lacrosse fight stories.
I didn't play junior lacrosse. We only played minor lacrosse against each other. So I always knew who he was because dual sport athlete. Mm-hmm. You know, he's a hockey player and a lacrosse player. So there was no real fights in minor lacrosse. And I didn't play junior, not unlike a lot of hockey players. Yeah. Once I decided I wanted to be a hockey player, I stopped playing lacrosse.
Because it's a rough game, like those hacks and whacks.
And I just focused on training. It was all about. Mm-hmm. It wasn't so much about that. It's just I want to do hockey full time. And then when I got drafted to the OHL, I made that kind of commitment. Hockey is my thing. I'm not doing it. I'm hyper focused on that only. So I wanted to train in the summer. Skate, power skating, and I just stopped playing. I didn't play junior lacrosse, and back then there was nowhere to go with lacrosse. Like there was no rock. The Toronto Rock didn't exist.
It hadn't developed the way it is now.
It wasn't. There was no pro game, and so you were just playing for the love of the game. Still,
a lot of good hockey players played lacrosse.
Oh, absolutely!
It's the hand-eye coordination. Who's it? Gretzky obviously was.
Yeah, John Tavares.
Yep.
Is a big lacrosse player. Shanahan, we mentioned.
Was Al McInnes one? I can't remember.
I'm not sure. He's from down east, and there's not a lot of lacrosse down there. But I'm not sure. I was mentioning my buddy Scott Metcalf. He played in Brampton. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, there's a ton of guys that... David Boland was a good lacrosse player, another tough guy. Mm-hmm. But, the similarities are so... They're so close. I mean, lacrosse, when you think of box lacrosse... It's played in an arena.
Yeah.
It's like hockey, 5-on-5 with a goalie.
You're wearing hockey gloves, hockey helmet.
Yeah, and you have line changes on the fly, just like hockey. You're up and down the floor. Offense, defense. The penalties are very similar. There's fighting we talked about.
Well, I always thought the fights in lacrosse are funny to me because, like, hockey, you fight that way for a reason. It's because you're on skates. But in lacrosse, you don't have to fight like you're in hockey fight. Like, you could maybe, like, dodge a punch or, like, you could throw a kick if you wanted to. They just come from the same culture.
It's the culture, yeah.
And the honorable way to fight, I guess, is...
And you're right. You'll see guys often, too. Sometimes they take their helmets off. Sometimes they don't. Just like hockey. You'll get that acknowledgement from two guys. Okay, let's do it this way with the buckets off. And they grab the collars just like hockey. I think it's just because most lacrosse players are hockey players.
But you'd never do that in an MMA fight. No. But you still have the luxury of fighting like you were in an MMA fight.
You wouldn't be able to kick, though. You would get a hefty suspension for kicking.
Oh, of course,
I mean, you could do it, but you'd pay a price with a suspension.
I've never seen it happen. I mean, I think it would go viral.
It would, and that covered... Yeah, there's a penalty for kicking. But I mean, the hand-eye, the playing in tight spaces in front of the net. In the U.S., they play field lacrosse. That's more the predominant sport, which is outside. And they love box players from Canada because they play in tight spaces. So you're in that arena, in that usually 185 by 85 hockey rink in Canada, where you're getting hit continuously, and you got to be able to maneuver
and keep control.
Yeah, and that's really, when you think of hockey with all the one-on-one battles all over the ice, that's what lacrosse is. It is a continuous moving one-on-one fight or battle, where you're battling for body position and just little openings so you can get by someone or get to the net. And when you're shooting at these tiny little holes. Yeah. Because the goalies, I don't know if you ever watched, they're huge. The net's smaller, the goalies are bigger. And you got to find... I loved it. I loved that game. I loved it as much or more than hockey, but as I said a few minutes ago, there was no future. I just saw... And I guess in Canada, the dream is to be the next Darryl Sittler or Wayne Gretzky. Yeah. Insert whoever your hero was, right?
It's more ingrained.
Yeah. So that passion is in your blood from the hockey world, where the lacrosse passion is only it's a small community. Yeah. But the hockey passion is, coast to coast to coast.
You're waiting in line at the club if you're a pro lacrosse player.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pro hockey player, you're going into the VIP lounge.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was it like getting drafted then? Do you get drafted, or you were getting called up to the Capitals?
That was a dream come true. I remember. I won't forget that either. The Skipjacks were playing in Portland, Maine. The Boston Bruins were in Portland back then. They're called the Maine Mariners, and we were playing in Portland. And I believe it was a Sunday night. We beat them, and my coach was Rob Laird that year. He called me into a room nearby. I just hit one-on-one, and he said, "Congratulations, you've been called up to Washington. Awesome. You're playing Tuesday in Detroit." And I was just beside myself with excitement. I think any player would tell you, that first time you get called up, and that's what you've been training and working towards since you were dreaming of that moment. Even from the day you get drafted, the draft is just a step. It's a big step, but it's still not. You haven't got there. Some guys get drafted and still never play. So it's a big step, but it's not the final step. So, I got called up, and this is another funny story from the book. The chapter's called "The Goon from Baltimore" in Shattered Ice. So I got called up. Doug McLean and Brian Murray had incidentally landed in Detroit after being fired by David Poile in Washington. Terry Murray's the coach of the Capitals, who I had in Baltimore for a year and a half. First game's in Detroit. I was skating around in warm-up. I was really nervous. It's funny, I felt like I was skating on ski moguls. That's what I say. I felt like I was going over bumps. Yeah. And I remember having this mental tug-of-war saying, snap out of it. This is a normal sheet of ice. Playing that mental. It was just nerves. So I was skating around. I see Doug McLean. He's on the home bench. So there's my favorite coach from last season, who's now coaching the other team. Yeah. But I thought, hey, he saw me. He's going to say congratulations. And I thought I'll go talk to him, or at least say hello to calm me down. So I go skating around. I go across the center red line, and we make eye contact. So I see he leans in. He's going to say something. So I lean in to listen, and he goes, "Hey, Seth, I told Probert you're the goon called up from Baltimore."
Oh, no.
Now I cruise by. I quick do a double take, and I look back at him because I'm moving. And now my mind's going, is he screwing with your head, or does he really mean this? I don't know. So now I thought, okay, I'm not going over there anymore. I'm staying away from the bench. Finish warm-up. We go back into the room. I'm excited again, still excited to get this game going. And Terry Murray comes in and he goes, the starting lineup is Hunter, Seftel, Druce. So I was thinking, like, this is fantastic. A lot of times you start your first game, right?
Yeah.
They do that for you. Just
That's
why not?
cool. Yeah.
A lot of time families there, and it's your first game, so they put you on the
Get
ice.
it out of the way.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
So I'm out. But now I'm on the blue line for the national anthem, and I'm standing there. I'm a left winger, and what players do, you want to know, who am I playing against on the other side. That's part of the preparation. So I'm on the blue line. I look across. I know I'm going to be against Detroit's right winger, and there he is, number 24, Bob Probert.
Oh, man.
And now I'm thinking,
First game, too.
I'm thinking,
the
okay,
toughest of all time.
okay, Mac, were you just playing? Is this a head game, or do you just yanking my chain? Did you really tell him that? Because like we said earlier, I'm not the pugilist, but I'm a big guy. He's a big guy. He's a bigger guy.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
6'3". He's probably 6'4" and outweighs me by.
Sometimes being a big guy is enough for a
Yeah.
fighter. Just want to. Well,
Yeah.
you're big enough. I'll beat on you.
So, with all the other thoughts going through my head, that was one I didn't want to have to worry about.
Yeah.
So anyway, the long story short is we line up, and we did bump into each other on that shift in the Washington zone on the sideboards. He didn't say a word, didn't look at me, nothing. And at that moment, I thought, okay, this was just a yanking of the chain.
That's a great prank.
Yeah, and we won that game in overtime, so that made that game kind of special.
Oh, cool.
To win on the road in overtime in your first game. And then years later, the kind of follow-up to this is I read Bob Probert's book. Mm-hmm. And he talks about that era or that time period in his life. And what he said in the book is, unless you were a legitimate tough guy, if you were called up like myself from the minors, you weren't getting the time of day from him.
No, he was so valuable to his team on the ice, too.
He basically said, that coupled with, he said, I don't have anything to prove to some kid I never heard of. So I really had nothing to worry about is my point that day, because he wasn't looking to he wasn't going to fight me.
Yeah, unless you did something.
Yeah, exactly. But if so I had nothing to worry about. But it's a classic story.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
I've heard 2 times in the last couple of years, I've heard Doug McLean tell that story on Rogers.
Oh, that's funny.
Sports on the
Sportsnet
at Hockey Central at noon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's told that story because him and Nick Kyprios used to be on there together.
Yeah.
And they've talked about that Baltimore Skipjack team that we were all together with in 1990. So the Skipjacks have come up, and Doug's told that story twice.
That's great.
And I heard it once, it made me laugh. The panel was all giving him a hard time. Why would you do that to him? That's his sense of humor. He's a funny guy. He's a great guy.
I think that's hilarious.
And that's a classic story. And I asked Doug to write the foreword for my book because he was my favorite coach. And I went to see him in Toronto in March of this year, and I asked him, and he graciously accepted to do it. I mean, that hockey family has totally embraced me with the book, and that was part of that, going to see him and just reconnecting, because for a lot of years I stayed away from the hockey world.
Yeah, and so I think that's an interesting time to talk about one of the motivations for writing the book, and one of the reasons why your career ended a little bit shorter than what you would have probably wanted to. So tell me a bit about some of the stuff that you went through as a player, and how it got you to where you are now.
Yeah, I always struggled with some mental illness, but I didn't know it at the time. So I always had anxiety, panic, kind of an obsessive compulsive behaviors that led to that. But I mean, hockey players do a lot of things habitually anyway.
Yeah.
It's just part of our
You think
nature.
maybe it's superstition?
Yeah.
Or, you know.
But and those behaviors turned to anxiety, and that anxiety turned to panic. But I didn't know what it was until February of 2000. Keep going.
Yeah.
February of 2018 is when I had what I call a mental breakdown and had to leave my employment, take time off work because I was in a bad place mentally. And I finally decided to get some help and treatment. And what I realized is I was suffering from a mental illness that was never diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to some therapy, and my therapist said, I want you to go home. She said, you know Michael Landsberg? And I said, I do. And she said, I want you to go home and listen to his videos. He talks about mental health and mental illness. And that was the first time in my life I heard someone talk about it, and it really kind of shook me. It was a relief, but it also shook me kind of the core to realize that there's something bigger going on here than just being anxious all the time.
Yeah.
And allowed me to, listening to him speak gave me the confidence to go find more help, which certainly helped me. And I went to see my doctor, a social worker, and a psychotherapist, and I got the help I needed. And then I was home, I was off work, and I started writing the book, and the book became therapy because I got a lot of these stories out that were buried for years that I didn't share with people. Mm-hmm. I always thought the hockey world turned their back on me, but it was really me fighting with myself.
You internalized things and didn't address them because you didn't know what was going on.
Yeah,
right?
I went inward, and I dealt with everything by myself, and I kept that world away. I pushed them back. I always convinced myself they were pushing me away, but it was me pushing them away.
That's interesting. And
meeting Doug in March of this year was one of the first steps to actually embracing someone again from the hockey world. Yeah. And I think I went to him because he was a trusted coach, and I had so much respect for him as a hockey man, and I just trusted him to lay this out for.
Yeah.
And he asked me to come see him in Toronto. We had a great discussion. We spoke over lunch for a couple hours and talked about the old days and where I was at now and what I had been going through. And it's amazing how many other people have family members who are also struggling or know somebody who's struggling. And we had a great chat, and I asked him to write the foreword, and that was the first time that I shared it with someone from the hockey world. And it was a great thing for me.
It's a big step, right?
Yeah.
And then I think it's important to say, like, you know, a book like this and things that like Michael Landsberg is doing, the awareness that's coming out now about mental health and stuff. I think I'm hoping that will help other players who are dealing with it, because I think, you know, as young hockey players, you don't get a lot of a lot of them don't, you know, finish high school. They keep, you know, they focus so much on hockey. They don't maybe educate themselves on some of the things that they might be going through, and hopefully the teams in the league start, you know, continue to implement more policies to understand their players and what they're going through and help these young guys, because it's, you know, you really do need that type of guidance when you're a young man and you leave home at a young age, and, you know, you're on the road, you're forced to grow up in a much different way. Yeah. And so if you don't constantly have people that are checking in on you, you know, stuff like that can get away from you, right? So,
and I think as we've talked about almost through this whole conversation with the hockey stories, there is a warrior mentality to playing hockey, and I think there's a fine line between you have to be that warrior, but you also have to take care of yourself. And sometimes though that's blurred and doesn't mesh. So, especially with mental health, because we haven't talked about it openly until the last. Really recently, it's just gaining strength now as something that people are getting comfortable with. But so you have to be, as a player, willing to look at yourself honestly and say, how do I feel mentally, and then deal with it. But at the same time, be that competitor that the sport requires you to be.
Yeah, because it can be a lonely road playing hockey. I mean, you see some of these guys, you know, like, I mean, we lost a few, like Rick Rippon, and he dealt with a lot of that, and you just see the the effects that it has, even the depression that comes from the concussion, post-concussion syndrome, and some of the guys that are really struggling with that now. So I think it's good having vocal people who are out in the public eye that are bringing attention to it, and hopefully other people see what's happening, and people feel more comfortable that they can reach out.
Yeah. And one thing one of my therapists said to me is with mental health, if you don't deal with it outwardly and you keep it all internal, eventually you either implode, which is self-harm, you explode, which is hurt others, or you get sick. She said eventually your body says enough, and it deals with it in not good ways. And for my case, I got sick, and my entire body started to swell. It's amazing. The body is an amazing thing, but my mental illness caused me physical symptoms that prevented me from leaving the house.
Wow. Yeah.
And it took me a year and a half to kind of get that corrected, but once I started to actually deal with it openly and seek the help I needed.
I have a question for you, and this is have you tried CBD for anxiety? How's that?
I have tried it, and
some people I know.
Yeah, I've tried it this summer. I'm on medication as well from my family physician. I find the CBD does have some positive effects. Yeah, it's finding the right amount that works for you.
Yeah, because a friend of mine who's a comedian, he said he struggled with anxiety for his whole life, and then he got on the CBD, and it's like balanced him out so much. Like, it's just an interesting thing that I'm hearing more guys talk about it.
And I've talked to my doctor about it, and he was comfortable with me using it. So, I mean, now that it's legal in Canada, Ontario doesn't seem to be up to speed yet, but I was in New Brunswick this past summer, and they're ready to go with their provincial stores. So it's just like going to the liquor store.
Yeah.
And I went in a store there and they give you some great instruction and information. It was really good. You get a one-on-one basically tutorial on it and about doses and.
Oh, that's cool.
So I did go in and purchase some in a capsule form to try, and it does help.
One of our sponsors for the podcast is Absolute Nature CBD Oil. I wasn't trying to even do it as like a shameless plug, but it's something I'm really interested in because I do know that, like, one of my really good friends was saying that he has that. He's had anxiety his whole life, and that's what, like, really he'd never felt comfortable until he got onto it. So I just think that was interesting, relevant to the topic, and other former players have talked about the CBD stuff. I think it helps them with their injuries. Like Ryan Vandenbush was on, and he was saying that he uses that too. So
I know a cream form also helps topically with injuries that I've had in the past. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And there's no psychedelic effect from it. It's just a topical
There's no
pain
THC.
relief.
It's just the.
I was disappointed when I came back to Ontario. Like, I'm thinking, why are we so far behind on this?
Yeah.
But New Brunswick was all ready to go.
They're on it.
It was nice to have that opportunity, at least if you needed it, to go in. Because here I don't really even know where to go for it, which is
like the. I don't know many of the companies in Canada, like our sponsors in the States. So they're out of Texas, but they're across the U.S. But you can't get that product in Canada. So
I had good success too with my. I went to see a naturopath.
Yep.
And another big thing that I altered was my diet.
Okay.
So something I was more aware of as a hockey player when I was playing, but after playing, maybe didn't pay as much attention to.
Doesn't matter as much as you.
They used to call that when you were playing. We would always say that's the fuel for the machine is what you put in your body.
Yeah.
It wasn't always good then either, but less so after I stopped playing. I didn't really pay attention, but my naturopath got me to change my diet, and I found that's helped my mental health as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that that we were able to do this here and join us on the podcast. Everyone who's listening, you can get Shattered Ice on Amazon.com, and where else can they find it?
Amazon.ca as well for Canada. I also sold one just for fun. Just for the listeners. I sold one on Amazon.au, which is Australia.
Oh, nice.
A Canadian from Prescott, Ontario.
Oh, cool.
Who lives in Australia. He bought one down there. But yeah, Amazon.ca, Amazon.com. If you're in Southern Ontario, I'm in Indigo, in Waterloo, Kitchener, and London. And then I'm in Wordsworth Books in Waterloo, Fanfare in Stratford, Book Express in Cambridge, Merrifield in Woodstock, Green Heron in Paris, Looking for Heroes in Kitchener.
Blown up, baby.
Yeah, Zenfire in St. Mary's. So I've hit a number of the Coles in Stratford. I've hit a number of the local bookstores.
That's great.
I've got my last book signing in Kingston on
Okay.
November 16th, and it'll be available in Indigo, Kingston as well.
Right on.
But for the larger audience, we're hitting the Amazon.ca.
Yeah.
It's been a great experience. I've had lots of support for it so far, and
That's great.
yeah, it's been a wonderful opportunity. I had my book launch was in Waterloo in August, my official one, and I had a great turnout at the Huther Hotel here with about 150 friends and family. It's been great.
That's great, man. Well, congratulations on the book. And again, thanks so much for being part of Fight Stories, guys. It's Steve Seftel. Check out Shattered Ice, Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, or some of your local bookstores across Canada.
Thanks for having me. We shared some great old stories that I love telling and that are in the book, and thanks for making the time for me.
Absolutely, man.